business panel this morning. The definition, it can depend on the context, but for us in Manitoba, we look at interactive digital media as those that are involved in video games, anything related to extended reality, so virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality, as well as interactive web and app development. So we have representation from many of these areas here on the panel this morning. So to introduce our panelists, we have Dan Blair, founder and CTO of BSD XR, also known as Space Development. Reid Valmestad, Director of Business Development and Operations at CoPilot XR. Sarah Tam, Senior Producer at Relic Entertainment. And Jessie, Business Development Officer for Creative Industries at Winnipeg, Economic Development Winnipeg's business development arm. So to kick off our introductions this morning, my name is Corinne Gusnoski. I am the Business Development Manager at New Media Manitoba. You're going to be hearing from a few of my colleagues here today. And as Louis had shared, we are that not-for-profit sector council serving the interactive digital media industry. And my role is to help companies here in Manitoba to grow. For our introductions this morning, I encourage each person to share a bit of a happy memory around interactive digital media. To start us off, for me, it was when I first played Pokemon Go. I was delaying getting started with it because I knew it was going to take over my life for a little while, as it did. And I was sitting at a bus stop, and I thought, okay, I'm going to download it. I opened the app, and the music, the nostalgic Pokemon music, and all of those happy memories when I was younger playing Pokemon came flooding back. So, Dan, I'd like to hear more about your work, your company, and a happy memory you'd like to share.
I guess I'll start with a happy memory. For me, probably my happiest memory in interactive digital media, going backwards to like 2016 when I did my TEDx talk. I had spent a lot of time talking about VR as a medium, extending our reality. It's very cringy, don't go watch it. And it's also quite dated. But in it, I showcased my daughter. She was 9 at the time, she's 15 now. And so my happiest memory is actually a fairly recent memory because she and her friends have since gone back and found my talk. And in my talk, I talk about it just being completely normal for her. Like, VR means nothing to my kids because it's not special when you have 5 headsets in every room, right? So for them to go back and find it and be inspired, knowing that they've had so much access to technology over such a long period of time is quite special to me because it was ingrained. What I was saying at the time, which now is nearly a decade ago, I was predicting that it would be so ingrained in their life, but to find out that it really did impact them, it did inspire them, and it's continued to inspire them to look into art and stuff along those lines, which to be fair is opposite of what I did. I'm very technical, famously not very creative, and they've kind of gone the opposite path, but it's because of that exposure to technology and exposure to seeing dad start a company and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of fun to see them as they're in high school, kind of halfway through that now, seeing it all come together as they kind of figure out what they want to do moving forward. And I've tried really hard not to kind of force that into them. So that's a very long answer to my favorite memory in this space. I'm, from a high level, do the 10,000 foot intro here. So I'm Dan. I'm the CTO, no longer CEO. I fired myself and hired someone far more responsible. But I'm the founder of BSD XR. I'm also on the board of directors for New Media Manitoba, currently serving as chairman of the board. And as my good friend Tom Furness said in his greeting, I'm also on the board of directors for the Virtual World Society. I spend a lot of time thinking about ecosystems, spending a lot of time thinking about how we can create not only somewhere where I can create my company and employ people and create opportunities, but also create ecosystems and opportunities for all of you. I started that here at Red River, so I'm a proud Red River College grad. Over the years I've worked closely with Kirk, so he has a great sweater, same one, and I text him that. Here at the college, starting with the ACE project space down on the main floor there, which is the student academia bridge into the startup ecosystem towards supporting organizations like Northforge. Of course, New Media Manitoba over the years, I try to create that space to help you all have an opportunity as well.
And Reid, looking forward to hearing more about you and a happy memory around interactive digital media.
Hi everyone, my name is Reid. I'm a co-founder at CoPilot XR, and I'm going to start with a happy memory. It's definitely a personal one that's actually I've never spoken about, and I thought about it when you were talking about your daughter. So it was last year, and my grandma was really sick, and she's passed away since, but it was one of those moments where you see the power that a technology like this can have. And my grandma had never seen the Northern Lights, and I remember she was in the hospital the last few weeks that she was alive, and I got a Quest 2 headset, and I brought it into the hospital, and I ended up putting it on her head, and I was really nervous, you know, how it would go, if she'd be dizzy, what would happen, and she ended up looking around in awe, and it was like one of the best moments I've ever had in my life, and probably with my grandma. And again, as much as that's like a personal and emotional story, that's a way that a technology like this that's fully immersive can really change lives and change the way that people look at media and mediums in general.
Can you share more about the work that you do with CoPilot XR?
So at CoPilot, we work mostly in the IC VFX virtual production industry. So what that means is, much like you see the projectors behind us, we work on massive LED screens, and we allow creators to go to basically anywhere in the world, whether it's, you know, on Earth or not, and we can shoot in real time for film production and television production.
Very cool. And Sarah, can you share with us more about you and a happy memory?
Hello, good morning everyone. So I will do the opposite and start with what I do, then move on to the happy memory because that might make a little bit more sense. So I am the senior producer at Relic Entertainment. Before then I used to work at EA as well as a game company called Blackbird Interactive. And then before then I was actually in marketing. I did a completely 180 change on, or 360, whatever you want to look at it, change in my career. Midway through, fell in love with games. I've always fell in love with games, but I decided to get into that, and it was my passion ever since. Yeah, so happy memory. Would definitely be the first time I actually shipped a game. I know it's kind of like silly, but you know, switching careers, not really knowing what I was doing, getting into this entirely new world, took on the role as the producer there, then the lead, and it was for a mobile game for It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, so I got to go like to the studio and like go to the lot. So for me, that was just the most incredible experience, and it was so cool to see the behind the scenes, right? Because I was always in front, I was always part of marketing, digital, and being in tech for 10 years, but that was so incredible to be able to actually like literally push a button and then see your project out there for the world. So that was definitely one of my happiest.
Excellent. And Jessie, looking forward to hearing about you and your happy memory.
So everyone, hi, I'm Jessie with Economic Development Winnipeg. Growing up, Game Boys, GoldenEye, this was, you know, the bonding mechanism for my siblings and I. So while there's no one distinct event, it was definitely a feature in our childhood, and of course the catalyst for that was my brother. I don't think my sister and I ever would have picked up GoldenEye on our own, but something we enjoy talking about to this day. So Economic Development Winnipeg is the city's lead economic development agency, and occasionally it does require some explanation. So we are tasked with growing the economy. That means increasing jobs, increasing capital investment in the city, and ultimately increasing the tax base. So we do this by advocating for the needs of private industry and ensuring the city provides the right environment for businesses to thrive. I like to say that Winnipeg is the squeaky wheel for businesses. So I, in particular, am that squeaky wheel for creative industries. So that means I work closely with video game companies, animation studios, visual effects to some extent, and also to a lesser extent, the live film industry. And I'm also sent around the world to promote why Winnipeg is the right place for businesses to expand. I'm sure everyone here knows we have one of the best IDM tax credits, and for companies that dabble a little bit in animation for film, we have probably the best film tax credit in Canada for animation as well. So, essentially, I help people imagine how their business can thrive in Winnipeg.
Excellent, thank you, Jessie. To give it a bit of context around our sector here in Manitoba, Louis shared some great stats at the start there, but to add on to that, we have about 204 companies in Manitoba that are related to interactive digital media. 73 that are part of that core when we're talking about the video games, VR, AR, interactive web and app development, and 131 that are more adjacent. They could be incorporating certain parts of IDM into the work that they do. We have 4,820 direct full-time equivalent employees in the province, which is a 50% increase since 2016 when we last did our census. The GDP impact, as Louis had mentioned, is that 357 million, which is up 119% since 2016. So when we're talking about that hockey stick, we're driving up there. There's a demand, certainly, for developers, but also in the SEO and business development space. So if you're interested in that, be sure to take a look more at companies that are hiring in the industry. I want to get to some individual questions here, but we always encourage a lively discussion, so feel free, other panelists, to jump in as you'd like. But Jessie, starting with you, given that context around the sector in Manitoba, when you're looking to attract businesses here, what are you looking for? What gaps might be existing here that could help if we're filling it for the sector, but then also for our local companies here, maybe complementary companies that would really enhance our space?
Great question. So Winnipeg's IDM ecosystem as it exists has a great variety of companies. We have our indie studios, we have Ubisoft, our AAA, we have companies that are making content for corporate or educational clients, and of course we have our XR companies who are on the vanguard making amazing technologies and saying things we've never seen before. And when I'm looking for new companies to introduce to Winnipeg to grow industry here, it's not that I'm really looking for companies that jive together. Because in digital industries, you don't have to hire your neighbor, or you don't have to work with your neighbor. You can work with companies from around the world. So really what I do is I target companies that won't necessarily put a strain on the existing ecosystem. So it's no secret that talent is top of mind for every single company. So, I can't bring in a company that would, immediately put too much pressure on our existing talent base. But I'll tell you the few things that I do look for. So first, they have to be in the export industry. That means they have to have companies, or they have to have customers that are from around the world. I can't attract a company that sees Winnipeg as a destination for customers. And that does occasionally happen. So basically, they need to see Winnipeg as a destination for an operational and a cost advantage, one of their cost-friendly home bases. Beyond that, I also look for whether they're established enough to say, onboard and upskill their own staff. If you're a small company, you need people that can hit the ground running. But large companies, they have more of an ability to, grow their staff, grow that immature talent base to a mature talent base. So they need to have the resources and the history of having done that. Beyond that, they need to have the resources to, say, work with U of M, work with Bev River College, so that they can upskill the young talent that's already interested in the industry. As much as I would love to attract another AAA studio, that would probably put, we'd be shooting ourselves in the foot. That would immediately exhaust all talent resources, as much as it would be nice to have another AAA here. But I think the triage studios are really the right fit for Winnipeg's environment. Beyond that, I think we have a real opportunity to attract companies that are more focused on, say, artist work. The loss of tangent animation has left, I think, an employer gap in the ecosystem, so we could employ more artists here. And ultimately, I know people will say chicken and egg, you have to have the talent before the companies come, but we all have friends who have moved to Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, greener pastures for creative work. my job is to just attract companies to come here so that our friends can return to Winnipeg, work here, and grow industry.
Absolutely. And Dan, I want to hear from your perspective as starting and leading this company that has grown here in the province over the years. Can you tell us more about that journey, how things have shifted as you've grown to your size today?
Yeah, I'll try to not be super negative. Louis looking there like he's nervous about the things I'm going to say. I'll be frank. Outside of a lot of talking, there's not a ton of support for the existing companies. There's a huge problem with local procurement. So you see projects coming through our museums and through a lot of local vendors that are being shipped out to firms out of Vancouver, for example, and then we just get subcontracted anyways. So there's very little incentive to actually do work here. So we've got organizations that are trying to bring companies here that are creating a shortage on senior talent. So we can say we're not bringing in people that is going to create a talent issue, but my issue isn't having an army of junior developers. My issue is having access to 2 or 3 senior developers that can actually get something done. And I'm not afraid to help tool up people. A lot of my emphasis has been put into creating programs within the ecosystem. But I think that there needs to be more of a focus, aside from just a tax credit that exists, on incentivizing people to, 1, stay here, 2, work here, and 3, actually create an ecosystem where business can happen, as opposed to incentivizing, sending work elsewhere. And a lot of that comes to basically socialization of how these projects happen, and then incentive programs from other provinces that may be pulling that business away from Manitoba. And I think that's the root of the problem. We can create more jobs if we're not sending work elsewhere, and if we're putting a big emphasis on bringing people here, and this is not a stab at Winnipeg or Yes Winnipeg or any aspect of that organization, but the only thing we've ever been invited to at any point in the history of working with Winnipeg is if we want to go bring people from, I think it was France, we got invited to like a hiring program. Well, I want to hire people here. I want to work with Red River College where I'm a grad. I want to grow that talent here. I don't necessarily want to import people from overseas, pay for that travel, pay for that rehousing, etc. So that is a problem. I think it's a long-term problem that we're only going to start to feel the issue because, I'm curious of everyone in this crowd right now, who's a student or a recent grad? How many of you guys have jobs lined up? Not seen a lot of hands. And so we're creating a lot of talent. We're not really creating an ecosystem where all that talent can be hired here. So we can try and attract a lot of people to come and look at our province all we want, but there's no incentive to actually create those jobs. And most of the studios here have staff in other provinces now because it's access to that talent or the business is happening there. There's incentives to hire and create those jobs in Toronto or Montreal or in Vancouver, etc. I'm a huge proponent for our tax credit and our ecosystem, and I think we can do better as a whole, but I don't think our problem is attracting any studios here. I think our problem is keeping the ones that are here alive. And our census shows that we are growing, and we're doing great as an industry, but just looking at what we just asked, there's a lot of people that are approaching the end of their studies, or as a recent grad, and we don't have jobs lined up for those people. There's nowhere that they're going to end up. So likely, either you're looking for remote work for remote studios, or you're going to move. And brain drain is a big problem. I think that there were some really good programs back when I graduated, which is now a long time ago, but we used to have tax credits to incentivize people to stay and work in our province, where you get your tuition back on your taxes. That went away. And then everyone was like, why is everyone leaving? We had a program that was keeping people here. I stayed, I put down roots, I have a family here, I started a company here. And it's because I had that window of being, staying here because I had that incentive. And they have long-term and lasting effects. And it doesn't matter where I go in this industry, I'm gonna find people from Winnipeg. So we are everywhere.
And that's a good point in terms of actionable steps there, of asking ourselves, and what is it as a community, and as part of that ecosystem, government as well, in terms of how can we set it up to be creating jobs for our young people, attracting that senior talent that's required by our companies, and really establishing that workforce that we need here.
Yeah, and the Game Biz Lab that we've come into Manitoba is gonna really help those initial startups, but it's once we get over that hump, that initial startup piece, it's kind of like, all right, we don't have the accelerators helping anymore, we don't have the business supports anymore, which is fine, it's capitalism, it's up to us as owners to figure out how we're gonna make our money. But if we're competing with other sectors that have those supports and aren't, just looking to bring more companies here, quantity of companies as opposed to the quality of the companies that are growing here is, I think, the wrong mindset shift.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing this forward as part of it's an important discussion, really. Sarah, I know you're new to Winnipeg. You've seen things happening in other parts of the country. I'm curious when it comes to either one with like best practices of maybe what we could be adding to Winnipeg here to be potentially addressing some of these issues, but then also supporting those young people that are, or maybe not young people, that are interested in getting into the industry.
Yeah, definitely. That's like a loaded question right there. No, just to give a little bit of context, so I'm originally from Toronto, born and raised. Then I moved to Vancouver. And I moved specifically to Vancouver to get into video games. But as I had mentioned in my brief intro, I was not in video games right away. I was in marketing. And back about 15 years ago or so, it was actually really difficult, especially in the West Coast, with all the different tech companies and the startups, to get into video games, especially if you didn't have any experience, if you're not from the city, if you don't have anything to do with games at all. It was really difficult. And so I started doing e-commerce for a little bit, got to get to know a lot of the people in Vancouver. By the way, it is true, it is really hard to make friends there. And then finally broke into games when I had an opportunity to use a lot of the transferable skills that I had in marketing and work as a marketing analyst as well as an ad in a mobile company. From there, that's kind of where my career blossomed, and I was able to go into production, and here I am today. So kind of going back to what we can do. I mean, yes, there's definitely a lot of programs. There's a lot of tech and a lot of talent and interest in the West Coast. But what I will say is the reason why I'm here in Winnipeg is because with this popularity of remote and hybrid, and a lot of the tech companies realizing, as Jessie was saying, you don't have to know your neighbor. You don't have to be that fit to work together. A lot of companies are even honoring this whole remote even after the whole pandemic issue. So I was able to move to a place where it's a little bit affordable. There's more family around. There's more friends around. I am a little bit closer to my family in Toronto as well, and established roots. And I think I'm actually seeing that happening in Vancouver. A lot of my friends who are in their experienced, maybe in senior positions, they're leaving as well. And for the same reasons, we're seeing that in Alberta. There was a huge push over there where a lot of people were moving because they can actually afford houses and things like that. So I think there are a lot of opportunities for places like Winnipeg where we can invite those who might have left to come back and have either the senior talent or either be able to appreciate the juniors or the people who are just starting out or people who are switching careers and not knowing how to go, where to go, what to do. You have now these resources and the talent pool coming back, being here to support everyone. And that's kind of why I'm here. I loved giving back to my community when I was in Vancouver. Basically, day one, I started, firing off emails to everyone being like, hey, I'm here, like, where can I meet people from the community? And I think a lot of the people that are also coming back to cities like Winnipeg or wherever they grew up, they're doing the same thing, and they just want to, give back to the community.
It's interesting you mentioned that bringing people back, having them come back here after they've gotten experience in other areas. As we saw that when the Ubisoft studio was opening here, these stories about people saying, oh yeah, well I've had my career in all of these other cities and I'm looking for that affordable living, being closer to family, and that excitement of being able to jump on the opportunity to not just find that and coming back to Winnipeg, but also finding great work at a studio that they enjoy being at.
And I think what's interesting about our industry as a whole, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, is, and you can probably speak on this, but we all know our challenges that we face here in Manitoba and kind of like the ceiling that we hit. But when it comes to proximity of industry, it's pretty incredible how if you have a question, you can call one person email one person, and within an hour you have an answer. And that's something where, a fun story, 2 days ago, one of our clients who we're working with on a project in Hong Kong was in town. They came to Winnipeg to meet us. And she was like, this is like a village. There's no one here. It's so quiet. And I was like, so how do you like it? She's like, I love it. Because she's so used to the hustle and bustle, and you know what, a lot of cities, major metropolis areas, especially like the GTA and Vancouver, there is that level of ego that comes with the industry, because they know that what they're doing is making impacts on a global scale, but it's so easy to put ourselves in a box here in Winnipeg, and it's just really important to not let that happen, because especially now in this space that's purely interactive and digital, we can work and collaborate with creators all over the world and use our talents here in Manitoba internationally.
When it comes to world collaboration, I know you've been doing work in many different parts of the world. Can you tell us more about, like, as a Manitoba company, of how you got to this point?
Yeah, I can give a bit of background. So my company, CoPilot, before we had the XR, after it was just called CoPilot. And we started as a video production company, and we specialize in tourism and destination marketing. So anything Travel Manitoba related, any of the tourism ads up in Churchill, that was us. Lots of like airlines and you know, anything to really showcase the destination and an experience. And then we were growing, doing really well. Company was growing fast, and then end of 2019 happened, and we shot a project in Mozambique, Africa at the time, and it was actually a medical conference called Open MRS. And I remember flying back on that flight, and I was sitting beside one of the health directors of the CDC at the time, and he's like, yeah, there's this thing coming out of China right now, and it's like, I think it's gonna be bad. I was like, oh, okay, whatever. So, yeah, 2020 happened, and suddenly tourism and destination marketing wasn't the thing. People weren't flying. You had to be really creative on, you know, how you can shoot these videos, because our entire industry relies on proximity and, you know, people working together in person. So we had to lay off ourselves, my co-owner, our staff members, and that sucked. So we were on FaceTime, and we were just chatting about, like, oh, what did you do over the weekend? How you doing? Just checking in. And we're like, hey, did you watch The Mandalorian on Disney? And we're like, yeah. Like, did you see how they shot that? Like, no. Like, what are you talking about? And then, you know, I'd share a video, and it was using this technology, virtual production or in-camera VFX. And we kind of had this moment where it was like purely a light bulb moment, where we're like, hey, we can do that. So that was the first kind of realization that we didn't have to stay in the same industry that we are. Like, we don't have to stay in the film industry. Like, the whole idea of cross-sector collaboration is very real, and you can pivot. And I feel like as any business, and you can speak for this too, Dan, like, you have to know how to pivot. And you're constantly pivoting. And if you
Adapt or die.
Exactly, adapt or die. Like, if you asked me what we were doing 3 months ago, it changes that rapidly. With technology, you have to adapt or you die. So we basically doubled down, and we learned as much as we could about this technology, and we did as much training as we could. And we started just partnering with different companies around the world. Whether it was us shooting like cold emails, or, you know, over Twitter DMs, like, hey, like, we'd love to connect. Like, how can we collaborate? And then as soon as the world opened up again, we were able to connect in person and see that impact. So I remember we went to our first conference after the pandemic, and we were in Vegas, and we met so many people in person that we have interacted with online, and it was incredible. So since then, that was how we started. That was necessary context. That was long. I'm sorry. Now we do basically the virtual production stage builds itself, because we spent so much time. We had nothing but time learning how to do it. Now we build it for other companies and for other production companies and studios. So yeah, internationally, it's been an incredible opportunity to be able to do that and working in different markets. And you see the differences in each of these markets and industries that you work in, but again, the commonality is the workflow, the commonality is the technology you're working on, and it really is a universal language.
Absolutely. Dan, I know one thing we were talking about before, you had a phrase, and maybe I'll let you share it. When it comes to entrepreneurs, people that are interested in getting into the interactive digital media space, what do you recommend for them in creating that product and in getting started out?
It's an interesting one. I like what Tony said earlier about starting without the headset. I put a lot of emphasis on what I call minimum viable useful, as opposed to a minimum viable product. When you're making your game or you're making your product or whatever, so if I flash backwards to graduating from here, I went through the business information technology program. I'm also a business dropout, just for anyone wondering. And when we started the ACE project space, we were really focused on how can we go from idea to a product. And I don't know if I've ever successfully done that. I live in idea land. I call myself the idea fairy sometimes, because I sit in meetings and I'm like, this would be cool. And so when I'm working with companies, and we have a pretty hard stance on we don't work with startups, just because of the way we operate. But when I talk to startups, helping them understand that when you're building your thing, whatever it is, the Uber for therapy, whatever, you have to understand, are you building something that is usable? Are you building something that will actually solve a problem? And that's even before the product, because you can solve a problem and someone's still not willing to pay for it. And working with people that have the final goal in mind, and they cannot stop, or they work in stealth mode, or they're, this is true with games, apps, whatever, it doesn't matter. You're building something, but you've never told anyone about it. I'll tell you right now that if you're sitting in the audience, you've started your game, and you've got your app idea, and you're working in stealth mode, I'll just be very honest with you, I don't care. I care, I want you to succeed, but your idea, I'm not gonna steal it. No idea is so fast that you tell someone and it's boom, someone else just ran off with your idea. If it's that simple, then you need a better idea. But it's understanding that you need to get out there and network and be part of the ecosystem and talk about your ideas and talk about your products from the beginning, to understand that if you're actually solving a problem. I'm only gonna buy something that's either gonna make my life easier or save me money. I'm not gonna buy something for the sake of buying. And if my life is better because I'm playing a game, or if I'm using a new app, or I'm using a product, fine. I'm gonna understand as a human, as a consumer, that I'm buying something that will ultimately improve that or reduce my risk of losing money, which they seem to only do. And it's being in that mindset of talking about what you're doing and socializing it from the beginning, because you kind of got to beat everyone over the head with it before you do anything at all. That will never really stop. That's the startup ecosystem in a nutshell. We're going to see 80% of businesses fail, whatever, after certain years. There's stats. I'm just making them up right now. They're real, and you can look them up. But it's also understanding that failure is part of that journey. I fail all the time. I'm a serial failure. And I structured my company around the concept of failure, making sure that we can kind of create ideas. So, a bunch of my staff hanging out in the back there. So, Dagan fails all the time. You can hear him talk about AI later. But the thing is that we fail together. We figure out what went wrong, and we adapt to that, and we kind of iterate. And that's the whole idea of being open and it kind of keeping that the aspect of hacking at the core of what you're doing. And so at BSD XR, it's really focused on it's almost like a skunk works how we operate. We do have products, but we almost are injected into these organizations, whether it's CN Rail or PCL Construction or whatever. There's a whole slew of them, Georgian College, whatever. When we come into the discussion, we just enable the ability to build something. So my LinkedIn handle is not I help companies explore VR. I literally just say I'm a tech enabler. I'm a bad influence when it comes to trying to save money, I guess. And so we sit there and we should add this technology, or this would be awesome. And generally, it works out pretty well. Luckily, we've obviously had bad adventures in technology. But it's at every level of what we do, everyone is encouraged to explore and fail, and it's okay to fail. It's what we learn from it. And so when you're getting started, whether you're creating your vertical slice of your first game, you want to pitch it to CMF, you want to get your funding, or you're building your app, is being able to put yourself out there and understand that maybe you made something that's not good. That's okay. You can always make another thing.
I have a fun story about that we discussed last week. So I first met Dan, I want to say 10 years ago, 12 years ago.
A lifetime ago.
Yeah, a long time ago. And there was a program at the time through the provincial government where you could submit for a business idea around tech. So I had this great idea. I was, a photographer and videographer at the time. So I made this motorized, automated, AI-powered before AI was really able to do that, camera slider. I had these ambitious dreams. I got the whole model made, and I ended up getting the grant. And a part of the grant, I was able to connect with local industry here in the city. So this is my first time interacting with industry. Super intimidated, fresh out of school. And I remember everyone, you know, when you have an idea and you're passionate and excited about it, people tend to say yes. They're like, yeah, that's great, that's awesome, like, well done, that's fantastic. And then I met Dan.
But I'm a nice guy.
Nothing has changed though, you're consistent, that's the thing. And I feel like when you're saying, you know, this is something that you embody within your company, it's okay to fail, you were the first person who, to me, you were like, this isn't it. I was like, oh, what do you mean? He's like, this, I see what you're passionate about, but maybe you can pivot in another direction. And I think it's one of those things where that's a very essential lesson when it
Would have been so rich right now.
To be fair, I have seen these products on the market since, so that sucks. But you're right though, where it's like, I feel like you can kind of get lost in the creative sauce when you're like on a small agile team, and you get really excited about something that's, you know, fundamentally life-changing or, you know, changing for the industry for you, but then the actual business behind it, that's less fun to look at sometimes. So you have to be realistic and you have to kind of check yourself constantly, especially because this technology changes so fast.
The business side of things is what people sometimes forget about. You have this cool idea, but you still got to do your accounting.
Yeah, and on that, you know, there's these great ideas out there. How do we execute and be organized in how we're executing these? I know, Sarah, we've talked a bit about project management before, and I know you're a senior producer working on the Age of Empires, so if you can share with us a bit about that, and then also philosophy and tips around project management.
Absolutely. And so, yes, I am a project management nerd, so if anybody wants to talk project management, just let me know, and happy to jam.
Jamil.
And I could also go into, you know, a whole talk about, you know, what does production do and how that fits in with project management, but again, that's a separate conversation. But how a lot of that marries together is in production, you really need to understand, you know, not only your deadlines, your timelines, and your budget, but you also have a lot to do with like managing people as well, their careers. And so project management kind of spans across the entire, not just your own project, but the studio, because it rolls up to the portfolio, it rolls up to your seniors and your execs, your directors, it goes up, and even if you're in a small company, you know, just really knowing when certain deadlines, when you want to ship, working backwards, dependencies, all of those keywords and, you know, the things that you love to talk about or don't love to talk about and gloss over when you hear someone talk about, that's everything in a nutshell. Did you want me to go further?
My favorite thing is, like, so Sarah and I only met recently, and I you know, I speak on panels, and you know, I look up everyone, and I was playing Age of Empires, and then an hour later we met. I didn't tell her that. I was literally playing Age of Empires 4, and then an hour later I'm meeting people from the team.
Yeah, so Age of Empires 4 is, yes, I'm the senior producer for that. And so we just put out an expansion recently, and then our game came out a couple of years ago. We just celebrated the 20th anniversary. And so all of these deadlines and hard dates and working with outsourcers and working with third party, working with your publisher, if you're not sure, you know, when someone comes up to you and says, hey, when is the next release, or when is the next code lock, or when is the next, you know, if you can't offer those answers, if you don't know if your staff is on time and on budget, if you're not able to produce those you know, concrete evidence, because you want to make choices that are not only, you know, gut and instinct, because I think there is a marriage between having data and product knowledge, but, you know, you can make a lot of those decisions purely from your experience, which is fantastic, but if you can back it up with data, if you can back it up in showing, you know, how you got there, show the charts, show the graphs. I am a person that, honestly, I don't care what you use, you can love or hate Jira, you can, you know, love Excel and will only use Excel for the rest of your life. For me, that's fantastic. It's what you're going to produce at the end. The tool is only supposed to enhance you. So it, like some companies, they're like, no, die hard, like we're going to use ADO for the rest of our life. That's awesome. I will learn it. I will understand it. But whatever helps me to understand the timelines, that's what's going to work best for me. And that's what I really encourage with a lot of my staff when it comes to project management and methodologies. I don't care if it's agile, if it's, you know, waterfall, if it's Scragile, if it's Scrum, whatever works for that group to get the quality that you need at the end of the day is, for me, the number one priority.
Absolutely. One of the things you mentioned there was communicating with publishers. And I recognize that for studios that are interested in connecting with publishers, one way to do that is by attending conferences like the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco each March. I know, Jessie, you were in MIGS last week. So Jessie, can you share with us more about your experience going to these different conferences and any tips that you might have for people that are also attending?
So I go to conferences with probably a different mandate than most people in this room would go to a conference for. So I go there to, meet companies, pitch the Winnipeg value proposition, grow industry in Winnipeg. And from my experience, if you want to get someone's time and you want to get someone's attention, talk to that individual early. So months before the conference, if you know you're going, make it public on your LinkedIn profile. Start reaching out to the individuals that you want to reach out to. Because when it comes time to actually attend the conference, their days are jam-packed. I mean, last week at MIGS, the Montreal International Game Summit, my team and I had over 30 meetings over less than a 2 conference day period. And attention spans do run short when you have that many meetings in a short amount of time. So come prepared and make sure you get their attention early and secure that time slot.
I'd love to add on top of that. So I used to do a lot of ad tech before I got into production, and very similar. I have very similar stories where, months beforehand, everyone's already connecting on LinkedIn or whatever networking site and saying, hey, do you have a minute? Little pro tip for anybody, when I went to my first GDC, I didn't have a ticket to go to the event because there was no reason for me to be there. All of the meetings take place outside of the event. And so they're all taking place in the lobbies and in the hotels across and around the actual event. So yes, GDC can be very expensive, and for somebody, let's say, who doesn't have a company that's sponsoring them to go down, I didn't need a ticket, and I was able to make all of those networks, all those connections, talk to everyone, never step foot, didn't even see a single talk. I'm not advocating for that. Definitely go and see the talks at GDC because they are absolutely fantastic. But if you're there to make any kind of networking or there to talk to people, you don't technically even need to be there at the conference, so you don't need a ticket. Save you some money.
Strong second to that. Put a lot of thought into how you're going to conduct yourself at the conference. Do your research, reach out to people, connect with them on LinkedIn. They're just people. They think they're not worth your time, so connect with them. Just be persistent, but be cool. But yeah, you don't need a ticket. Just show up and go to the parties, because nothing actually happens at the conference. It's all about the after party.
There you go. So kind of this conversation around, we were talking about publishers a little bit, going to conferences. So want to open up a question to the whole panel here, whoever wants to jump in, around more of the marketing side and getting those customers, whether it's your first customer or your 1,000th customer, some tips or approaches.
Yeah, I can speak on that. So at CoPilot, when we first moved into the virtual production space, it was really hard to market because where we're based, and so we decided to take an approach where there wasn't really a thought leader in the space yet. It was very brand new. So we decided to we started a YouTube channel, and we went full out on this. And it's something where we spend a lot of money per month on our YouTube channel, and there isn't a direct ROI. So if you were to talk to, we have business consultants, and they roll their eyes at us, and they want us to do the opposite. But it's hard to explain how you can have something like YouTube, where you can put out content, you're in control of your own marketing, your message, your brand, and suddenly those views, let's say if you even have 1,000 views in a video, those are real people. And in an industry that's really small and niche, that's a lot of people. So I remember we started putting the videos out, we're about a year in, and we started getting clients. And then suddenly we got an email, and this person's name was Nick. And he was like, hey, I found your YouTube channel, and I'm interested in building one of these virtual production stages. It was really just didn't seem like a serious email. And that turned out to be our first ever stage that we are building, and that's in Texas. It's opening in January. And
We love Nick.
yeah, Nick, yeah, unreal. And it's Nick with a K, which is unique, like K-N-I-C-K, very unique. But yeah, when it comes to marketing, there doesn't have to always be a clear ROI. as long as you have your KPIs in place, like you know internal goals that you want to hit, that's essential, but there doesn't have to be like always like you do this and you get this.
Any thoughts around marketing with our other panelists here?
I think like for me, so BSD XR sits firmly in the B2B space. Like we do a lot of work for rail and construction, aviation, defense, stuff along those lines. So you won't see our approach to marketing be very similar to, for example, like the Age of Empires campaign, where it's targeting you guys. So our approach to marketing is very much more, I want to say like guerrilla style, where like we're at a very specific event, and I've flown halfway around the world to meet one person in particular, and it's to be in all of their social media. So for me, it's very much being tagged in the group posts on LinkedIn that permeates our existence, and we end up in circles with like the virtual world society and stuff along those lines. And so it's a very different approach. You have to understand the market that you're in, but as individuals, you also have to market yourselves. So when you're trying to either get started, either your career, like not everyone has to start a business, so don't believe that lie. But when you're advocating for yourself and you're putting yourself out there in the industry, you want to make a game, you want to work in games, building your portfolio, putting effort into how you present yourselves. That's marketing, right? And like as an employer, and I'm not the only employer here, but I'm sure they're all experiencing the same thing. We're just overloaded with information all the time, right? People applying, opportunities, trying to prioritize all this stuff. If you put the effort into your portfolios and your own personas, then it'll put you leaps and bounds ahead of others in regards to putting yourself out there. So advocating for yourself, building your own brand, putting yourself out into the industry, putting effort into marketing, even if you're not a business, but you're marketing yourself, will help you succeed.
And then I will add from the development standpoint. So for example, I talked a lot about ads and being in marketing before. That's actually not super common in a lot of game studios, for example, to have a marketing division. And so for those who might not know, a lot of the times if you're like an indie studio or somewhere small, there is a possibility you might have someone in the business side who might, have hats where they're doing both, business development as well as marketing, as well as like help out with HR and events. So there might be someone there, but that's, few and far between. A lot of the larger studios, they will publish, partner up with a publisher. And so a lot of the times, the publishers will be the person or the team or the company that supports the marketing efforts and the business efforts and helps you get all that, wonderful advertising or promote Age of Empires and have someone like Dan play the game. So that's all on the publisher side. And so just in case if anyone is thinking about that, that was for me one of the hardest things as I was trying to break into games, especially because there wasn't a lot of studios that had like a marketing department for me to break in and use those transferable skills. So luckily when I did break in, it was only one, position out there, and I was able to get that, which was incredibly lucky, and I'm so very fortunate for that. But I know that's not, a story that a lot of people can say. So if you are looking for the marketing perspective on that side, a lot of the states, a lot of larger studios, corporations, things like that.
Another piece to add to that too, from the marketing on the studio side, I think it's really important. So if you do start a company, you start your studio, you've got your team. My philosophy and vision here is taking a video of me right now on my marketing team. So I'll give him a pat on the back later. And he will put me on all kinds of stuff. But I think as leaders, it's important that we elevate the people that work with us. And so when you look at our marketing, you look at our social media, even the presence at the conference today, I'm really trying to highlight the people that work with me, not just me. I'm just one dude. I'm a guy. I'm going to go home and I'm going to watch Oppenheimer later. Probably build a fort in my kids' bunk bed with them and we'll watch Bluey. But I just do normal things. So I think there's a big emphasis on founders and CEOs and leaders to be these oracles, these mythical figures. But I'm going to probably order a pizza later. And it's more about highlighting the people that work with you, because team is people. And those people live here and they have lives and value. And I think it's a shame whenever the marketing really gets put on just the figurehead in an organization.
Great points. So soon we're going to be getting to audience questions, so keep this in mind. I'm going to ask one more here. So I know that a lot of the panels today are going to be touching on technology, but from the business perspective, share with us more about thoughts around technology into our operations or productivity, whether it's artificial intelligence, headsets that are using our mixed reality, so you can be typing on keyboards at the same time. Share with me more of your thoughts there.
I'm happy to start with that one. So I work with a lot of different technologies at Space. I learned in one of my adventures with the Learning Disability Association of Manitoba that I probably have ADHD. Never been formally diagnosed, but I identify that like I mostly just switch tracks all day. And if you walk through our office, you'll see we do lots of 3D printing and additive manufacturing. We develop electronics. That's all for our peripherals and our IoT gateways. We lean heavily into AI, so you'll hear from Degan later today on some of the ML ops infrastructure we put in place and a lot of the services we built. Try to be at the forefront of building this technology, not just using the technology. But that's also true in VR. And until very recently, we actually never said we were a VR company. And even today, we still say we're a digital worlds company, and we build technology to support those digital worlds, although we added XR to the name. So I guess now we kind of say we are an XR company, which is fair. But for the adoption of technology, we as professionals, everyone in this room, we're all professional developers in IDM, need to understand that, yeah, a lot of this technology is originally brought into an innovation budget and into an innovation project, or I'll call them a tinker project, where a company or individuals or studios are just kind of playing with the possibilities. But eventually, this technology moves to operations. And with some of our corporate clients, so the rail sector, stuff along those lines, that means that we're going from like a pilot to a full-blown deployed course that's being delivered through training facilities. Understanding that there are things that need to be put in place to make that a possibility. So there's a bit of maturity that needs to be put into the service providers from insurances and stuff along those lines, and strategy that can help you deploy something over the course of 5 years. But exploring technologies and being open to new technologies, I think, is what will be the differentiator between the companies of today and the companies that already exist, is because historically, as humans, we were really focused on, we had a very limited tech pool, and we were very much turning people into cogs. If you look back to like the 30s, and, the manufacturing revolution, we started putting people into factories. Eventually, we added robots to help those people, but those jobs ultimately changed. And we're seeing that kind of happen again with the introduction of technology. And there's a whole panel about this later. I don't want to go on a long rant, but the World Economic Forum put out the top 10 skills for moving forward in 2023. So basically over the next 5 years. What's really interesting about those, and if you want to see them, shoot me a DM on LinkedIn or something, I'll send you the slide. But most of them are about technical literacy, active listening, and your human skills. Because now technology, you think of technology like AI, is better at being a cog than we are. We have creativity in the way we think, whereas the machines, they don't sleep, they don't stop, and they're not going away. And so your ability to work with the humans around you is what will set you apart from anyone else in the sector. And we have to understand that as businesses, that we need to understand the humans as we're exploring the technology. We need to embrace the technology. We can't lose sight of what makes us as a species more valuable than the technology that we produce.
Any others want to add on to that?
Yeah, you basically hit every point there. My main points are around adopting with new technology and finding ways to use them in creative ways. But I think when you think about the IDM industry and something like a real-time renderer, so you have Unreal Engine, you have Unity, and the fact of the matter is,
Don't forget about Godot.
we use Unreal Engine, so I'm not even going to speak of anything else. The fact of the matter is that a lot of these platforms and real-time renderers, they are resource heavy. So whether that means you need an expensive computer to run it, or whether that means you need extensive knowledge on how to actually use it to its full potential. So it comes down to accessibility, and it comes down to using technology to make programs and platforms like Unreal Engine more accessible for more creators. So imagine if you have a circle of people here, and these are the people that are using Unreal Engine right now because they know how to use it. However, you have filmmakers, documentary makers, you have just general creatives in general who maybe would be on the outside circle, and they would never think to dabble with this technology because it's not accessible. They don't know how to interact with it. So that's something that we kind of keep at our core at CoPilot, and that's how we started using AI, computer vision, foundational models in general, just to find ways to allow users to interact with these complex pieces of software and have things happen for them in front of their eyes. So an example of that is flight deck. So we released that back in August, and that basically was much like a Google search. So imagine, everyone here is familiar with Google, and it's something where you're so used to seeing a text box and it's welcoming. You start typing things and things happen for you. You've programmed, you're used to that. So we decided to implement that into Unreal Engine. So we were like, hey, that'd be cool if that would work. So we basically put that into the UI of Unreal Engine as a test, and we connected it with a LLM, which is a large language model like ChatGPT. And we were able to train the LLM to actually give us back in Python code, which is what the engine understands, and it was able to actually do things in the engine based on just a text request. So from there, that basically started our entire AI and machine learning side of our company, and we're building tools for specifically virtual production and game development right now.
LLM, Wizard.
We're using Claude at the moment.
Cool, it's a good one, guys. Look into it.
Jessie, Sarah, any quick comments before we get to questions from the audience? Around technology and business. Okay. So questions from the audience. Throw up your hand and we'll call you out here. Any questions? Chris?
Come up, we'll put you on the spot.
Question for Dan and probably Jessie. You mentioned working with airlines and railroad companies, things like that, and we know a lot of work with construction. But where are you seeing industries look at VR? Where do you see the industries getting excited about using virtual tech and making virtual production, things like that?
So just to repeat the question there for the audience, what are opportunities when it comes to other industries interested in this tech?
So the biggest right now that you'll find when you're talking to enterprise is on the L&D side, right? So a lot of learning and development, process training and process augmentation. So the most popular stuff would be teaching you how to swing a hammer more efficiently, or if you're on a manufacturing floor, so you think of the aerospace sector, they really don't leave any margin for error when assembling a jet engine. They often run into a challenge with skilled workers. We talk about having a hard time finding a few developers in the IDM sector, try and find a bunch of well-trained aircraft mechanics. So that's probably an industry that we'll see a lot of automation through robots, but such is life. But putting on a HoloLens and walking you through that process. So if anyone here is not familiar with the HoloLens or the Magic Leap, we've got both of those, as well as the Nreal on the table over there. Actually, the Nreal is the original dev kit, so it's probably got his tech in it. But go check out that stuff, because that would be something you could wear on the job. And the HoloLens, for example, has an intrinsically safe version now, which is important for oil and gas and laboratory settings where you can't have certain radios that are going off. Bluetooth can trigger things, stuff along those lines. But what we're seeing now is a fundamental shift into operations. So people going away from those low-hanging fruits projects and looking at long-term things. So with the introduction to AI avatars and LLM functionality, which is why we invested in it, it's a lot more focused on soft skills training, putting people through scenarios where they have to de-escalate something, or they have to handle a stressful situation in a more human way. So actually, Zenfry, and Dee is speaking later today, we worked on a really, really cool project a few years ago called Moral Bar, which was with the University of Manitoba. And it was all about you're a bartender and you have to make some decisions, and it's voice acted by Corey. I love it because I know Corey so well. And so every time I put it on, which is only truthfully only once every few years, I love it because it's like, hey, how's it going? And but the idea was to measure how you're feeling over a long period of time after the decisions you've made in a VR environment. And so we're seeing that as an adoption piece. Now, of course, I don't have to sell this to anyone, but VR is a medium, right? So it's a screen, it's another way for us to interact with a digital layer. So what we're finding more on the operations side now, which is why we are a digital worlds company, is a focus on digital twins. So big companies within the construction space, manufacturing space, we may create complete digital replicas of their environment, which is part of the reason why we invested heavily in our Swarm platform, which is our IoT command and control system and model delivery platform, which allows us to deploy computer vision models and collect data from the edge. So whether that's environmental data or very specific sensor data. We just deployed one of these with a pathogen laboratory called Resinova, and we use AR as the medium to display that information in a lab setting.
And I'll just add, so at Economic Development Winnipeg, I'm in charge of creative sectors, video games, animation, film, but we do have a few managers that work in, say, agriculture, aerospace, manufacturing, life sciences, and I'm happy to introduce you, and they would have way more information on the kinds of technologies that those companies are looking for their operational benefit.
And if I could add one thing there, is you mentioned computer vision, but what we're seeing is a huge trend towards using computer vision and AI models to actually recognize trends and do quality assurance, and basically it's like taking video and converting it to an Excel sheet is the simple way to say it. So basically, let's say if you're on a construction site, our models can actually, look at how many workers are wearing construction hats, what color are their hats, so it kind of ranks it by seniority. So you can actually start using mediums that already exist and data that already exists to extrapolate data from there and put it on a spreadsheet or whatever you need to do with that.
All of his models can be deployed through Swarm. We've got a partnership we just put together up here. There's one more thing that's extremely fast, and I always talk about this with Louis, is, in my opinion, the IDM sector is special because we call ourselves a sector. We've got companies that exist very firmly in IDM. But there are no companies that exist that can't be an IDM company. Whereas, I'm probably not going to start a farm and join the agriculture industry. A farm may start using digital twins or VR or AI technology and ultimately become an IDM company. So we're a very unique sector because we can cross-pollinate across all sectors and solve problems, and very few other sectors can do that.
Thank you. And I think we have time for one more question from the audience. Yes, here?
I have a group interested in exploring VR for everyday computing. I'd like to ask the panel what are your experiences?
Play with the Lynx. Got the new Lynx over there. You'll like it.
Play with.
The Lynx headset. It's for everyday computing. It's based on your hands. It's a very unique approach to the lens. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think you might like it.
Okay. Anything else?
There's a plenty. Come and hang out at my booth. I'll show you all kinds of stuff. Avoid the Quest Pro.
Sorry, did you want to add something there?
More of a question, because I'm kind of outside of that space, to be honest, for everyday computing for VR, but what are some challenges that, what needs to change for people to actually use this for everyday computing and everyday work?
Yeah, there's two. One, our eyeballs suck at looking at screens for a long time. And, I grew up with my parents saying, don't sit so close to the screen. I understand there's a lens, we refractor that light, but, you're still gonna have eye strain. So, I work in VR. Do I wanna work in a VR headset all day? No. Most days when I go home, do I play games in VR? No, I just spent the whole day playing a chainsaw simulator. I'm not gonna go play Beat Saber. I'm gonna play Age of Empires. It's actually a break for me. But the other piece is there's very little crossover. We don't treat the VR devices as we do a laptop or a phone. There's a ton of vendor lock-in. And so you could work all day if you really, really like Horizon's workrooms. But I have a Quest Pro and I use a MacBook Pro laptop. I got all the pieces to do it. Can it stay connected for a significant amount of time and not ruin my flow? No. So from an ecosystem side, I think we need more transparency between platforms, more interoperability between headsets. And then on the software side, we've got one offering from Meta. We've got other, Immersed has their new Vision headset that's coming out that is all about adding virtual displays. I've got a Roku headset that it acts as a massive display, which I actually just really like with my Steam Deck, to be honest. But at the end of the day, we're still putting screens on our faces, and you're gonna have fatigue. Your eyes are gonna hurt. Your face is gonna hurt. You're gonna have a VR face. We all know what VR face is. If you don't, is when you come up looking all gross. And it always messes up my hair. It's just like, it's a comfort thing. So headsets are getting smaller. I know Zenfire has a Quest 3 at their booth. I've got the Pico Neo 4 at my booth. I've also got the Lynx. There's a plethora of devices that you guys can check out. But all of them are still strap it, I think, to your face. And I think that's the biggest barrier of entry. I missed my prediction. I was doing talks way back in like 2014 about this stuff. And I was like, by 2022, the headsets will be like, remember when we put those big things on our faces? Well, we're still putting those big things on our faces.
Yeah.
So,
I was thinking of, when in the future is it going to seem archaic for us typing on a keyboard? So there's certainly a lot of growth and opportunity when it comes to technology and just operating a business and
we've
productivity
got the solution to the
space.
keyboard right over there.
Yeah,
Got you covered.
exactly. Thrilled to see that. And yeah, from Winnipeg too. I think we have time for maybe one more quick question from the audience here, if anyone has a burning question. Right, and the back.
While we're walking to the back, in regards to like computer vision, I encourage you to come over to our booth and try the Orwellotron. We've got a computer vision model built into it that will predict your emotions. So if you've never seen like predictive modeling, it is built into the arcade cabinet. And a big shout out to Jamil on my team. We're showing his game Superstar Shooter 16, which is available on Steam. Now over to Dan.
This question I guess I'll pose to whomever is interested to answer it. I find a lot of times people maybe don't see the journey that it took for you to like be on panels. So I'm wondering if panelists can touch on like obstacles or difficult moments in their experience to get to this point. So I find it's easy to talk about success and I did this and I have a company, but some obstacles and issues and less than positive things that you have to overcome.
Hello, okay. So I can give kind of like my experience about getting into panel talking. And so I am actually petrified of speaking in public. I did not do well in school in all the business classes when I had to do presentations. That's not what my forte was at all. When I started getting into games and I needed to speak, not even before then, when I needed to speak to stakeholders or anything like that, I would get very nervous. And I actually expressed that this was something that I've known as a weakness in myself. And so one of my managers and one of the CEOs really encouraged me to continue. They saw that, this is something that you can, it's a skill, you have to just do it. You can read all about it, you can go to classes, but it's a skill. And so one of the first panels I ever talked at was at Pocket Gamer Connects in San Francisco a few years ago. And I had been in the game industry for 3 months. And I needed to pose and pretend as if I understood ad tech and had to give this panel speak where I was talking with people who've been in the game industry for years. Super intelligent, super smart. And something that I did was dye my hair super bright pink. And that actually helped me a lot. That helped me get in touch and talk to people, network, connect with people. I wasn't as terrible as I thought I was as a panel speaker, so I got invited to do more panels. And then I actually fell in love with it. It's been part of being my give back to the community. Not only do I try to do small, informal conversations with people, but I also love doing panel talks as well. And so it's really just getting out there. Sometimes people approach, but sometimes I'll ask. I'll see, opportunities come up, and my heart is saying, please don't do this because you're going to be so terrified on the day of. But my brain is like, do it, just do it. You never know, it might be the most exciting thing in the world. And you have good panels and bad, but everybody here in this room has some kind of knowledge to impart to somebody. And that's the thing that I really need to understand for myself. Imposter syndrome is a thing, but my experiences are my experiences, and it might help somebody out here, especially if you're trying to break out into the industry, especially if you're a new career, changing careers, anything like that, new, student coming out of school, just do it. You never know how you might support and help somebody else in the crowd that just needed to hear that from you.
This is my first panel.
And we appreciate you coming out, Jessie.
You're doing fantastic.
I know, I'll I'll have a different career trajectory than, other panelists here because I'm really not in a tech role, if that hasn't been made abundantly clear already. Really, I have a job that works with people, it connects with companies, connects with local industries, and I think an important part of my comfort in my job, or why I like my job, is that I happen to enjoy working with people, and I think if people can sense that you like what you do, then they're probably more inclined to invite you to participate and be a more welcome member of the community.
I feel like this is a loaded question in general. It's a great question.
It is a loaded
applies
question.
to everything. Imposter syndrome is huge in every industry, and it's one of those things where every day when you're working towards something as a business owner or a creative, you have that goal that you're working towards, but the reality is there's going to be days where it sucks and it's really challenging, and you're, even like this week at work, rendering out a scene that just wasn't working. It was like 5 days worth of rendering just to, have something that it's just challenging, but you kind of have to take a moment to yourself or put on blinders even, and just like stop looking at what other people are doing around you and just kind of focus on what you're good at. And it's one of those things where it's easy to put yourself and your talents down, but again, when you can look back and say, whoa, look where I was a year ago. So, yeah.
My story is way too long to get into. I had a kid very young, which altered my trajectory, and I'm glad I did because it built my character. But a lot of that fed into starting my company, which was completely by accident. And I tell people all the time, I actually just don't know how to stop doing it. Like, I'm not lying. I literally don't know what paperwork to file. And instead, I just keep growing it. But that path to growth and kind of where I'm at today, well, like in the last year, I fired myself as CEO to bring in Dave, who's at the back. How's it going, Dave? Cool guy. He's got interest, or you should talk to him too. But understanding that you got to lean in on your skills, right? So I made myself CTO, and I mostly just spent my time building strategic partnerships. So I should have been like partnership manager or something. But such is life. You wear a lot of hats when you're starting a company. But my biggest thing is I've almost been running this company for 10 years, and in that time I've built a lot of friends. I've also had to fire friends, and going through that path and sort of that journey of understanding you got to make difficult decisions. You're not really prepared for that when you're getting started in the industry, because you're going to have to make tough decisions, and you're also going to, and I talked about this at length earlier, you're going to be comfortable with failing. If you fail the first time and you think, oh no, this is not made for this, it's, understanding that everyone is failing all the time, and what will set you apart is your ability to learn. Well, it took me 4 years to learn that. So I just kind of was fumbling my way through this for a long time, and it wasn't until all embarrassingly recently that I started understanding more about what I needed to do as an owner, and every year I write a letter to my staff, and every year I'm like, this is our year where we grow up and all that, and then I look back at it a year later, I'm like, god damn, I'm stupid. Just show up. But it is challenging. I did a talk at one of the Peg Jam events a few years ago about the loneliness of starting a company. The sole founder of BSD, and when you do something like that and you grow in this industry, you both become a target for people that are unhappy because you let them go, which is fair. I'm fine with that. But you also people that don't go through that path can't understand the journey that you've gone through, so you can't also open up about that stuff. And so I did a talk about how lonely it is. You're surrounded by people, but you're surrounded by people who are paid to be there, or you owe them money, or they owe you money, or whatever, right? And it's challenging. And so that journey is both full of people and also very lonely. But the number one thing as part of my journey is I'm very, very introverted. You'd be like, Dan, you don't seem very introverted. It's because I'm supposed to be here. this is the only thing I do is I talk at these things. But I read an awesome book called The Introvert Entrepreneur, which I have a copy of in my office, so come down if you want to read it, borrow it or whatever. But it's all about budgeting your energy and understanding where you're you're spending your energy, and I just spend all of it here, and then I'll go fall asleep after. But that's been one of the biggest challenges, you know, that, and as Reid said, the imposter syndrome piece. I'm not smart enough to be here. I just build things.
Well, I appreciate, Dan, not just you, but the whole panel here, and the energy that you have brought to this panel. We appreciate you coming out. Today we were talking about many different topics around interactive digital media business, and I think one of the takeaways I want to highlight here is that whether it's a technology company or implementing technology in your company, that those people skills, and when we're running those businesses and making those connections, and it's helping us get new clients and new employees, or et cetera, is how do we not lose that part of it and make sure to continue to emphasize those skills. So I want to thank each of you again. Thank you to Fabio and Josh and the rest of the Hyper team here for having us. We're going to shift over to the next panel. So if you want to continue the conversation with these lovely people, you can do so in the rest of the space here as we're going to continue.
Also, big shout out to Corinne for moderating all of us, because
It's fantastic, thank you.
we would have just gone rants, so thank you, Corinne. You are the best.